Hello everyone, my name is Ben. If you don't know who I am, I make educational lifting videos. And today we have this question, which is, what would you advise for someone who wants a fuller chest? Well, I'm gonna give you two exercises that will allow you to target your entire chest, yes, with just two exercises. And in doing so, I wanted to really teach you about the principles here so you can take something real away from this. I don't want to give you, what are the best exercises. I want to tell you what sort of categories of exercises you need to grow your chest completely. Now, this question comes, by the way, from a member of my private community. Link in the description below. It's totally free. You can join free. We have over 1,100 members. It's awesome to see so many people connecting already over these topics. And yes, it is 100% free. So you got nothing to lose. Check the link below to just check out the community and learn more from me. And you can ask questions like this, and I may answer them in a video like this. So anyway, we'll get to the more nuanced parts of this question later on in the video when we circle back. But let me just give you some real concrete takeaways real quick. So I like to divide, when I'm trying to think about the chest simply, the chest into two portions. There's the upper portion here, and then there's the lower portion here. Yes, could you technically subdivide it to a greater degree? Like, could you say there are three portions? There's this portion right here, which is, attaching to the clavicle. There's this portion here attaching to the sternum. And then there's this portion down here, which attaches to the ribs and the abdominal fascia. Yeah, you could subdivide more. We could be more specific, but I don't know. I don't really think that's necessary for our intents and purposes. And so when we think about chest training, I think about it in two categories. And when we think about the upper chest category first, we want to prioritize movements that are done slightly wider away from the body. We are dragging our arms kind of a little bit more horizontal and then maybe like slightly inclined, okay? And the reason that this is the case, the reason that we have biomechanics that operate in this way, if I can just get out my marker here real quick, is because if you think about these fibers right here, the green ones, right? And you look at my chest and me over here, they're the ones that are gonna kind of run at this angle. A lot of people think that they need to do these like really high incline presses to train the upper chest. No. The upper chest is actually a fairly horizontal-ish type of thing. And so essentially moving the arm in this kind of direction as I'm doing here on just a normal ass chest fly, this is an exercise that is just absolutely fantastic for the upper chest. And so I want you all to think about this in principle. I don't want you all to think about, oh, I must do a machine chest fly to train my upper chest. No, I want you to think about what other exercises could I do that kind of look like that, right? So imagine that I didn't have these machine handles in my hand. And imagine instead I had dumbbells and I was doing a dumbbell fly at this angle or a dumbbell press at this angle. Imagine I was doing a Smith machine press at this angle. Imagine I was doing a barbell press at this angle. Imagine I was using cables and doing cable flies with this angle, right? Anything that kind of mimics this angle right here, which is basically like slightly low to high, or basically just pretty much right in the middle, somewhere close to that, and with an arm path that is slightly wider, that's going to align with those fibers that are running perfectly in that direction. And the one thing that I really want to make clear about the upper chest in particular is that in order to fully stretch it, what you will notice is on the eccentric portion of all these reps, you don't need to get super far back behind your body, right? Because the upper chest, it doesn't stretch with shoulder blade motion. So this is a little bit more nuanced, nitty-gritty, but I'll just be brief with it. If my arm is here and I retract my shoulder blade and then I protract my shoulder blade, that's what those motions are, retraction, protraction. The upper chest does not lengthen with these motions, okay? So basically, once your arm has gotten back to a point where your upper arm bone is, sort of at an angle like this, you don't need to continue to go further back, because stretching the arm back behind the body like this, strangely, is really just composed of that shoulder blade motion. I hope that's clear, right? So there's a difference between my upper arm moving and my shoulder blade moving. And to fully stretch the upper chest doesn't stretch more when the shoulder blade moves, right? Because all these bones are moving as a unit, right? And to create stretch and contraction, we need relative motion between bones. So just to kind of explain that a little bit more clearly with my bones here, if my upper chest attaches from here to my collarbone over here, and my upper chest moves back, basically, only moving the shoulder blade just moves all of these things as a unit. It doesn't actually create more relative stretch. So that's basically just a long-winded way of saying you don't need to go super, super deep into a stretch to get a full lengthening of the upper portions of the chest, which is why you don't see me going back super, super duper far on an exercise like this. However, when we contrast that with something for the mid and the lower chest, which I'll just call the lower chest, That is really when we want to prioritize squeezing the shoulder blades back on the eccentric and then driving the shoulder blades forward on the concentric. And what you'll notice is that this angle, unlike the other loading angle, is slightly high to low, right? So I am pressing such that the cable is kind of pulling upward slightly relative to my torso. So this long blue line that I just drew is my torso, right? You see this angle right here, it indicates that I'm sort of loading slightly like a dip. And then as I press forward, I'm kind of pressing forward and down, almost kind of like I'm aiming for, you know, the nipple-ish area, maybe slightly, above or below, depending on sort of what feels a little bit better relative to the exercise. But the principle here, in terms of what we can extract from this, is that in order to target this blue portion of the chest here, we just need something that is maybe slightly high to low or even horizontal, and something that prioritizes a little bit more shoulder blade motion, right? So you see that in this exercise, I'm really getting deep back into that stretch position. Pause it in the stretch, where my arms are really far back behind my body. Excuse me, another way to think about this that I really love is if these are the lower chest fibers and these are the kind of fibers that look more like the middle chest, you want to kind of angle a resistance in any way so that that angle of resistance is kind of almost parallel and opposite, right? So you see how this direction of the cable is almost parallel to this blue line, right? If I wanted to make this even more lower chest, right, I would want to angle the cable even more like that, so more like a dip. So in principle, if we can extract principles from this, much like we did with the upper chest, what we want for the middle and the lower, or really the lower half of the chest, is some kind of press where we're really prioritizing shoulder blade motion. It could be a fly as well, doesn't matter, where we're moving at that slightly higher sort of middle to middle angle. And so in tandem with that, it's a little bit easier, generally speaking, to get your arm back behind your body if you're a little bit more narrow. So unlike the upper chest, where our arm was sort of wider up here, where we were moving more in this direction, for the middle and lower chest, I would encourage you all to kind of experiment around with maybe like a 45 or 50 degree angle away from the torso, and then pressing downward that way. It's just a little bit easier to get that that greater degree of lengthening. Okay, so for the upper half stuff, we have wider stuff, flies, presses, etc. And then we have slightly narrower stuff and slightly higher to lower angles. And the reason, again, that I'm just showing one exercise example for each of these in particular is because what really matters are the loading principles. Okay, so this could be a machine if I'm loading it at that angle. This could be a dumbbell press. This could be a decline machine press. This could be a dip, right? This could be a decline push-up, right? Whatever it is, we just need stuff that is pulling us backward and sort of upward, against which we're pressing or making a fly downward. And then that's for the lower chest. And then for the upper chest, we do what we talked about before. I gave many examples there, okay? So I hope that in principle, those make sense. And then to address this last part of the question here, again, from one of our members, he asks, is there any specific exercise that can help with that even a little bit? And really what he's referring to is this idea of like, part of my chest is solid, but the other part doesn't look as full. I think a lot of the times, to be honest, when people ask these kinds of questions of like, I had this, you know, particular gap in this muscle, I think just everything tends to need to get bigger. I think all of us have these sort of just genetic predispositions based on our bone structure, our muscle insertions, how our connective tissues are structured, the length of tendons, etc. We have all these unique and sort of individual bony and muscle things that like just stuff looks different from person to person. And oftentimes what we do is we create this ideal. You know, we look at Arnold and we say, my chest is this way and Arnold's chest is this way. I mean, Arnold's an extreme example, but his chest can look so full in a way that so many other people's chests just can't. And so my advice isn't necessarily to just nitpick about specific portions of a muscle, but to just understand principally like, okay, these are the exercises that I know I need to do, these wider fly type things, these narrower, you know, press type things. I'm just going to get these areas as big as possible, and I'm going to see it down the line when I really am patient with this process, when I have really committed to consistently progressing in load on the same exercises week over week, month over month, year over year. I'm going to wait and I'm going to be patient to see how this will sort of end up. There's going to be no sort of quick fix, single exercise solution. A lot of people in particular in short form content are selling solutions like, if you do this exercise, then that will lead to this. It's like, well, if you do the exercises I just recommended and you do them for a very long time and you're doing everything else in the gym right, you'll probably get get bigger in all likelihood, but like we can't make promises. We can only sort of follow these principles and hope that our efforts are sufficient enough over the longer term. So don't be in a rush. Try to find enjoyment in just progression of the exercises and just in your training more generally, because you know those sort of psychological factors are typically what allow people to actually make progress when they just look back on this whole like backlog of work that they've done and they see the results that they almost didn't even notice day to day occurring. So I don't know, a bit of a wonky and more psychological answer to that question. And then the final bit about this, I addressed the specific exercise bit, but I think this is actually an interesting part of the question, which is what's your take on those contraction-based or inner chest focused exercises people talk about, and do they actually work? Here's what I would say about this and why it's a little bit more of a nuanced conversation. So if you think about like the different portions of the chest, right? If you're doing some kind of press where the load is really, really heavy when your arms are kind of stretched behind your body, all the different portions of the chest are going to be able to pull the arm forward to varying degrees in that position, right? If my arm is here, well, look at my, actually, I'll just show you from this angle here, right? So imagine that this, I'll just delete this now. Imagine that this arm just moved backward in that direction, right? What would occur is you would have the upper arm bone kind of like this, right? So let's just say red is equal to upper arm bone. And then all these fibers would be sort of running at this backward angle like this. And so what that would allow for is it would allow for what is known as a moment in all these different portions of the chest to be able to pull the arm forward in a variety of directions. So these green represent the splay of fibers, basically, and the lines of force that they could create. So when the arm is back behind the body, even if it's slightly wider, like all these different portions of the chest can act to push the arm forward. So what the hell am I talking about and why does this matter? Well, because if you do exercises that are really stretched focused, then all of your chest can contribute. But if you do these more quote unquote contraction-based exercises, as my community member was referring to, these contraction-based inner chest focus exercises, well, what happens at that particular point? Well, when the arm comes further across the body in toward any one of these single points across the body, we're in a more shortened position. And when we move toward those more shortened positions, the functions of each of these portions of the chest become more differentiated. So think about the upper chest and the lower chest. My lower chest pulls me all the way down here and across, and my upper chest pulls me, I'll do this with my other arm, this will be funny. Upper arm goes down here for lower chest, upper arm goes up here for upper chest, right? So you end up in these very divergent places when you move toward the more contraction squeezed based positions. And so you can be more specific to those portions of the chest because you've entered those squeezed positions. So when we say, do these things work? Yes, they work in the sense that they're more specific. So if you wanted to be more targeted about which portion of the chest you were training, you would maybe want to do more of the squeeze focus work and maybe do some squeeze stuff up here if your goals are upper chest and some squeeze stuff down here if your goals are lower chest. But ultimately, it's not like the principles are different, right? Because these different exercises that I showed are, you know, this is mostly an upper chest thing, this is mostly a middle and a lower chest thing. You could just spend more time in that squeeze position, emphasizing the pause. So to be more specific, use the squeeze stuff. To be less specific, to be more generalized, use more of the stretch focus stuff, right? Because even an exercise like this will target the upper chest to some degree, although not very much. But I hope that overall these principles were useful in the sense that you can extract, okay, what other exercises can I do for these things based on what Ben is talking about in terms of the patterns, rather than just saying I must do this or I must do that, right? When you focus on principles, you expand your options. And when you focus on specific exercises and particular movements, you shrink your options. And my goal for all of you is to actually educate you. It's not to give you these cookie cutter, do this, don't do this. And if you're still watching at this point in the video, you've been listening to me rambling this long, you're probably someone who is interested in just that. And so I hope that you found this helpful for those reasons. Again, if you want potentially your question to be answered like this in a longer form video thoroughly, join my free community, and also you can connect with so many other people. We already have some people who are potentially thinking about meeting up in person all the way across the world, which is super cool. So anyway, I hope this was helpful, and I'll see you all in the next video.